everyone, Maria here from Animal Hospital Lake Villa, and this is my dog Chewy. He is here with me because I wanted to give you guys some tips about fireworks season. He is very, very afraid of thunder and fireworks, and so there are some tips that I've learned from here working at the Animal Hospital, along with just trying some stuff out that seems to work with him. So I'm going to go over some of those tips with you guys today. Tip number one is the most important one. It is always walk your dog about an hour to 2 hours before the thunderstorms and the fireworks begin. The reason why this is tip number one and why it's the most important is really, really simple. Dogs tend to get very, very scared when they're outside and it's thundering, and one of their first reactions as soon as they hear the boom is to flee. And so when that happens, they can either do it very quickly and the leash slips your hand, or they can come out of their collars, and then they run and run, and so obviously that can be bad because you can lose your dog. They can run into traffic, they can encounter another wild animal, so we don't want them to do that. So number one is always walk your dog about an hour to 2 hours beforehand. If you are in a scenario where it's thunderstorming all day and all night, of course, you'd still have to take them out. Try to find the time when it's a little bit calmer, and always make sure that the collar is placed on him properly. You should be able to fit 2 to 3 fingers underneath the collar. That'll tell you that it's snug enough where it won't slip, but at the same time, not too snug on him. You want to make sure that your dog is microchipped. That is always important no matter what, because you never know what can happen. And then with that, make sure you're updating that microchip information too, because it's not going to do you any good unless you have up-to-date information on there. So if you haven't updated it, take that time to do it right now before the fireworks start, and call up your microchip registration people, let them know that you have moved or that you changed your phone number. Dog tags are also very, very helpful because a lot of times those can be the first thing that tells somebody, oh, this is their phone number, I can call them. But again, it's really important to keep that up to date. Tip number 2 is actually one of my favorites. It's actually creating a safe space for your dog. The reason why it's one of my favorites is because it actually worked really, really well for Chewy. And so what we mean by a safe space is if you have an old carrier of them, or even if you're doing a cage, you can use that perfectly fine. But the whole purpose is to keep it where you guys are hanging out during this time. So, and the reason why is because pets, they want to be with their loved ones whenever they're scared. They definitely want to be with you. So if you put it in a separate room, it won't do you much work. You want to keep it with you guys around, on the floor, right next to you guys. Make sure that the door is open. That way, as soon as he gets scared, he can run right in there. And what we do here is we set it up with some blankets and comfortable stuff inside. And the outside, you want to try and pad it. The more padding that it has on the outside, the more it's going to muffle the noise, and so he's going to want to go right in there and just hang out. I will usually put a pillow on the side, on the top, on the other side, and on the back of it, and then another comforter or blanket right on top of it to make it nice and padded, again, to muffle out the noises. This worked really well for Chewy up until he was about 4 years old. He didn't develop his anxiety until he was 2, and it worked really well up until he was about 4. He would literally just go into a safe space and, hang out in there. Sometimes he would even fall asleep in there. But then after a while, he needed a little bit more help. And so we'll get to that a little bit later. So that is tip number 2. Tip number 3 is actually playing some music in the background. Some of the music that you can play should be something that's a little bit more dance music, or even has like a high bass or a high beat to it. Dr. McGinnis recently attended a continued education from Dr. Sally J. Foote, who recommended this list of music. Actually, you'll find a lot of Queen on there, some Beatles, some good even ABBA music. All of these songs tend to have a good beat, and the main reason why we want to have that rather than something like classical music playing is simply because dogs look for consistency in sound. And so what disrupts that consistency tends to be the thunderstorms outside or the fireworks. And so this playing music that has these kind of sounds in it will kind of help keep that a little bit more constant. And it'll help reduce his fear, stress, and anxiety during those thunderstorms and fireworks. Tip number 4 is really, really simple. One of the things that you can do is tire your dog out. A tired dog will want to sleep and hopefully sleep through the noise. but you know, a lot of that will require, if you have a really active dog, going outside for a run, playing outside, playing catch for a really long time, maybe an hour or 2 hours before the thunderstorms start or the fireworks start. If you have a less active dog like I do, he does not really run outside as much, but you can still keep him distracted with some of his favorite chew toys or even peanut butter cups. Something, you know, putting peanut butter inside of a cup, that way he's nice and distracted, and that way once, you know, the fireworks do start, he should be tired enough to want to go to sleep. Tip number 5, and the last and final tip, is if your dog is experiencing such distress during the fireworks and thunderstorms, the best thing you can do is call your local veterinarian. There is a lot of medications out there to help. Chewy started to need those right around 4 or 5. I noticed that all of my techniques were not working anymore, so it was time to look into other medications. So he is a very, very good dog for the most part, but when we, actually that's Thunderstorm right there. So great time to make this video. But what I was gonna say is that it does take some figuring out to figure out the right medication for your dog. A lot of that might be trial, because as you guys know, every patient is different, just like every human is different, so what might work for one dog might not work for another dog. For my dog's case, we did go through a couple of different medications. The first one we tried was alprazolam, which works for a lot of dogs, but for my dog, it took away the anxiety for the thunderstorms and fireworks, but for some reason it took away all anxiety, so he was running around the house like crazy, going through the garbage, scratching at the windows, barking at the neighbors, everything he could possibly do, he was doing. It's actually something called hyperexcitability, and it can be a side effect of that medication, and it certainly wasn't my dog, so we had to try other medications. Just because it wasn't going to do me any favor if he was going through the trash and getting into something else that would just cause a different problem. So then the doctor recommended trying something called trazodone. Trazodone ended up being a great medication to reduce some of his stress anxiety, especially when going to the grooming and when strangers were coming over. Any kind of company that I would have, he would see it as, "Mom, that's a stranger, please bark at them, you know, get him out." And so trazodone helped with all of that. It wasn't quite enough for the fireworks and the thunderstorms, so doctor had recommended increasing the dose, which did work, but then it just made him sleep. So not that that was a bad thing necessarily, he was still a lot less stressed, and I would rather have him sleeping than shaking in fear. But then a newer medication came out. It is called Sileo, and it became my favorite for my dog. It is upside down, and now it is not. It is my favorite medication for my dog because it tends to take away all the noise phobia, but at the same time, it keeps him the dog that I know and love. It doesn't make him too sleepy. He's basically just his normal self, only the fireworks and the thunderstorms don't bother him like they normally do. Now, this is just my dog's story, so keep that in mind. Your dog might work better on a different medication, and that's totally fine, but that's what your veterinarian is here to help you do. So if you need that, please give us a call at 847-356-VETS to find out what the best medication might be for your dog, and to figure out other ways that we can help during this scary season for them. Okay, well, thank you guys for listening, and have a great day. Bye.